Yo, 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 what is going on, RoK Familia? It is your boy BN, aka Mr. Kingdom Builder, and today we are back again to drop arguably the highest quality knowledge and education when it comes to Kingdom Builders that you probably will ever see. That's okay. I'm comfortable saying that. But today we are going to be touching on another important topic, which is an article I actually came across here on Reddit from someone in Raya that actually shot me this link, so shout out to my girl there. And this is about 3 months old, and I was just kind of reading through it, and I thought it would make for a fantastic video to talk about when it comes to why exactly jumper projects can succeed, they can fail, kind of the unrealistic expectations some players have on them. What are true objectives of jumper projects, and then depending on how a project plays out can factor into how players view jumper projects as a whole, which is actually going to be in some of the comments that we're going to read here in a bit. But I wanted to touch on this because I think it's just a great opportunity to not only discuss this, but to also explain from someone who just has a lot of experience, and I've had my own forms of success as well. And before we dive into all of that, as always, if you guys enjoy the content, make sure you sub, like, ring the notification bell, and if you want to join our conversation, you can always hit up our Discord, which you can find in the description, and pin comment down below. So let me first start off with just kind of my resume, if you will. This is something that I'll actually show you here on our server, right? So you can see here, I actually have a resume section that I made. And this is kind of a general portion, stuff that I've done in RoK, stuff I've done in Infinity Kingdom. I have reference videos that I link. This is something that you don't usually see. I've never actually seen a jumper project for the entire time I've been doing projects. When I started, probably since even before that, I've never heard of or have ever seen a group that actually has a resume channel that kind of lists out what they've done, can provide kind of reference context, videos, and etc. as well. But in short, right, one of the things that everyone knows, everyone that has played in a project I've done before knows, out of the 7 I've ran, 4 being in RoK, 3 being in IK, anytime I'm running a project, they just always have the highest chances to be successful. This is not the same as saying that every project will be successful for what the true primary objective is, but that because of the structure, the standard, the professionalism, the way that we organize, we will always have the highest level and highest percentage chances to be successful over any other project that's running at the time that I'm doing a project. I can say that confidently and comfortably because it has always just been the case for all the projects that I've ran. Now, let me briefly talk about, before we get primarily here into the article, I just want to talk about what I truly believe true objectives are in a kingdom. And to do that, let me head over here to just kind of show you an in-game visual. So, when you are getting into a kingdom, right, as a jumper project, and again, this is beyond what anyone else will tell you, right? These are just facts. When you go into a kingdom, your true objective as a jumper project, and really your primary goal, is to essentially establish majority presence and control in the kingdom. And what that defines as is you pretty much, in short, being able to get to zone 3 and have majority control, right? Or managerial control of the kingdom, because you have more alliances in zone 3 than others, or all of your alliances are in zone 3. And you are able to kind of, I don't want to say dictate, but you can manage and stipulate, let's say that, things like, LT rotation, who's coming in. You can kind of be like the main managers of the kingdom, right? That's the goal, right? Doesn't matter if you have every zone 1 province, if you have every zone 2 province, but that you have majority control, you have the largest presence, right? You have the most force in the kingdom, however you want to define that. That is the true and only primary goal of projects, right? That's your first obstacle, right? And really the main one. Anything beyond that kind of starts getting into, your KVK 1s and beyond, right? To me, that's icing on the cake. And sure, it's great. I don't think that there's a project out there that would ever tell you, yeah, we're just going to make it to Last Temple and then we're done. No. Obviously, you, of course, want to last as long as possible. You do not want to kind of be a one and done or an LT and done type of group, which I've never seen one that has ever been promoted that way. But it is good to recognize the importance of what these goals are, of what true goals are for every jumper project, right? It's not we're doing this to bring our mains over. It's not we're doing this so we can become Imperium. No, you're doing this so you hopefully can reshape and build a kingdom in the ideal image that you would like to build it in, because you have played somewhere before, you've playing in your current kingdom, and you just notice areas of improvement, things you can do differently, things others can do differently that you feel could be better, right? It's kind of like when you're, it's like going from the wheel to the tire. You know what I mean? You're taking something and you're building on it to try and do it better, right? Or in a more improved way based on your vision or your group's vision. And that's a very important distinction, right, to make between what others feel doing jumper projects are for. I have never believed that. Even though I think it's a great thing, right? Sure, you can bring over your accounts at a later time, right? It was kind of more of, like I said, the icing on the cake. It was more of like a secondary objective that could happen from you completing your primary objective. Okay, with that being said, again, what I will say as well is, for those who may not know, right? I think as I mentioned, right, with my projects that I've ran, right, I think will also help me give a little bit more insight, if not hopefully a lot of insight into the article. So let me now kind of bring this back to the article here in question, which is, right, I feel bad for people joining some jumper projects. This person says, Parking Head says, I have noticed some jumper projects that have been posted on Discord that are led by the same people as past projects. One person in particular has led at least 4 projects that I know of. One was a kingdom I was in which failed. I'm guessing the others did too, because this person was a shiitake mushroom leader. This person never saw past KVK 1 from what I heard, yet keeps leading projects. I am sure they are not the only one like this. It's pretty pathetic. Gotta feel bad for all the new players joining these that probably will quit because of it. Anyways, there is my daily rant against the blight on RoK, known as Jumper Projects LOL. Let's hope Lilith nerfs them soon. What I will say here is, again, and I don't know what projects this person is referring to. What I will say is, I think it's, like I was saying before, right? I think it's important to recognize, how I'm sure many groups have succeeded in making it at least to getting majority control, right? And that primary objective being fulfilled, and then kind of getting into your secondary objectives, which is lasting as long as possible, trying to do well in KVK, right? Trying to maintain your structure if they have one, and I'm sure more onto that. Now, when it comes to, right, people leading projects, let me be the first to say that, and this is something I talk about pretty often, is that not every leader, not every officer, not every member, and definitely not every project leader, jump project leader, is going to have the same levels or amounts of experience, knowledge, and you could say maturity, if you will, as another will, right? This means that almost everyone going in has a different amount of that. And that is a huge factor, because if you were to consider, right, how many players are out there? Well, there's a lot of players out there, right? And because because the player base, just as being a player, is the largest base out of these 4 examples. So if we go member, officer, leader, jumper project leader, members have the absolute most amount of player base to pull from, right? Which means that the average level of knowledge and experience is probably going to be a little bit higher because you have more people that you can corroborate with. Then we get to the next level, which is officers, right? You can have, what is it, up to 8 officers per alliance. So, okay, it's a drastically less pool, a drastically smaller player base pool, and meaning that, okay, well, because it's a more defined class, okay, you're probably not going to have, the highest standard level of knowledge and experience per player, per officer, that you would kind of looking at a per member base. Then you get to even a more finer, a higher tier level of expectation of knowledge and experience in a leadership position. And you can only have one leader, right, just for all intents and purposes, right? You have one leader at that moment in the alliance, with however many alliances are in the kingdom, right? Now you're getting into an even finer and more smaller limited player base, which means now the standard level of knowledge and experience is less because you have less leaders to pull from and to cooperate with, and arguably less resources that are out there specifically for leaders and officers. If you look at the amount of resources content-wise, whether it's YouTube, whether it's in-game, whether it's article posts, blogs, guides, the majority of the content in any game, pretty much 99% of it is focused on a player. If you go out there and you look at any of the YouTubers that have been doing RoK content for a while, look at what the majority of their content is about, right? It's about a player. It's looking at it from a player perspective. It's not looking at it from the officer's perspective or the alliance leader's perspective or the project manager's perspective or managing a kingdom's perspective, right? Now, there might be some one-off videos here and there, but you have to really understand I don't want to say the psychology of it all, even though that definitely factors in, but how the game trends towards the material that it produces for the average person. And the average person is a player. Then you get to the next highest tier, which is, in my opinion, the absolute highest tier, which is managing a project, leading a jumper group, right? Now, if you think about why jumper groups were really started in the first place, well, they were started initially to make a new kingdom, right? To do it better than how they did it before, better managed, better informed, better organized, more structured. And then the opportunity to bring your main accounts over, right, was kind of a second objective. But the primary objective, because again, you can't bring your main accounts over if you don't have control of the kingdom. You have to meet your primary objective before you can get to any secondary objectives. So if you think about this is how projects, just, through a little bit of common sense here and a little bit of logic, right, we can discern this. So now you get to the point of where you have the kingdom in play and you're a project lead. There are arguably no pieces of content, pretty much, out on YouTube or other that tell you how to run a successful project, how to run a successful jumper project, right? Now, I have content out about it. I'm probably the only person who has what I feel to be the most educational and most well-informed pieces of content about how to run a jumper project, how to build a successful jumper project. There's no one else out there that has those pieces of content that I have out currently, right? And what I will say, and that's not a slight or a jab at anyone, it's just these are just the facts. And so you look at how there's pretty much nothing. Well, how are you going to have expectations for people to run successful projects if, one, they don't have any, I shouldn't say any, but they don't have certain amounts of knowledge and experience when it comes to running them. Now, the other side of this, and again, we're going to talk about some of the comments here. The other side of this is that in order to have a good understanding on running a successful jump project is you have to get some experience, right? You can't just make experience out of thin air, right? It's like that age-old saying. God, it's not even the age-old saying, but it's like from, what's the examples from back in the day where, in order to get experience, you have to have an opportunity to get experience, but how can you get it if the opportunity is never there? And so what I will say is, and let me explain this from like a very fundamental level, and I'll probably make a separate video on this as well, but if you want to get experience in running jump projects, you really need to have a foundational and a mechanical understanding of how RoK operates. And I'm not talking necessarily from like knowing every single in and out. Because, for example, you don't necessarily need to know things, like you don't need to be the most expertise person in commander pairings or PvP matchups or rally report readings, right? Like that isn't really relevant to managing a jumper project, right? You have to kind of view yourself as a district manager, right? You are managing a group of people before you really get into any kind of in-game specific things. Now, yes, this is why it's also important to have a mechanical understanding of how things in an alliance work. An example of this would be, how do I place a flag? Where do I place a flag? How do I set up markers? How do I do alliance tech recommendations? Right? How am I placing my center fortress? How am I informing my player base? How do I keep players engaged? How do I keep them active? Right? Those are things that when you look at from a managerial perspective, right? If you're a manager at your job or at your work, that's kind of like these are some of the golden questions, right? These are some of the golden hurdles that managers look to try and solve, which is how do we get more activity? How do we get more engagement? How do we get better production per employee? Right? These are just some of the things you ask. And that's kind of the mindset you have to put yourself in when you are looking to get a better understanding of who these people are that are leading projects, which again, we're going to tie everything back in if you're not already noticing where we're going. Right, when it comes to the people that are leading projects, is that, and this is one of the funniest things, I'm going to give you one of the best pieces of kind of golden nugget juice that I have. And I actually just thought about this before I made the video, is that one of the things I notice is that players, most people that are running jumper projects, right? If we're going to, where's my RoK thing here? So if we're looking at just projects that are being ran currently, right, you'll notice that, I don't know if I'd say you should notice, right? The conclusion I have really come to is that the majority of people that are running jump projects are treating it like it's an alliance with unlimited capacity. That's the mindset they're approaching it from. They're approaching it from the mindset of leading an alliance instead of the mindset of above that, which is I am arguably responsible for all the alliances that are involved in the project, and therefore, by extension, the leaders, the officer teams for each, and also accountable for the players. I would often see, if I peruse other projects or if I get feedback from players, and a lot of times what you'll see is the leaders of the project actually also leading alliances in the project. Now, I am not going to say that I think that is the worst thing to do, but I will say very strongly that I would advise, if you are in a project where the leader of the project, whoever started it, is planning to lead an alliance, my strong recommendation is that they should not be leading an alliance. Right? This is something I do, and I have done a few times before. And I have noticed that even though, yes, would I love to lead an alliance? Of course, right? I have led alliances before. And it is fun, it's exciting, but it's also demanding on time. And because of that, it's important to recognize that if you are building a project, you are the architect, you are the person who knows, like, everything is in your mind, right? Like, you're putting everything down on paper, whether it's from the plan to the prep to how you're going to manage events to the ins and outs to how you would engage with other players in recruiting and diplomacy, how you would gather intelligence. I mean, you really, as a project lead, in my opinion, have to have this level of foundational knowledge and experience. And the only way you're going to get that is by doing those things. Right? You go and you be an officer, like a contributing officer in an alliance. You go try and lead an alliance. You go and try and do different department tasks and take on different roles. This is what I did. When I first started playing in my home kingdom, shout out to 1196, who taught me a lot of, who gave me an early education on how to have kind of a foundational level of structure, of organization, of knowledge, of kind of sending, good practice mails, of getting involved in departments and really understanding what those were and the different roles that came with them that alliances have, and how that factors into like what you do on a kingdom-wide level. And a lot of what I do now has just kind of been to build on a lot of that, and then also introduce new things that I've learned along the ways, right? Or I've picked up, or I've kind of come into my mind from gaining a lot of this knowledge and experience. And that's why I think it's important that, like, for me, when I first started my first jump project, I didn't do it until I was playing the game for at least 2 years. Now, I'm not saying you have to play the game for that long, but having an understanding of all the different areas, right, from all the different positions in an alliance, to leading, to being an officer, to being a contributing member, to then working and doing things on a kingdom-wide level, when you can really have a good, I guess I could say experience for lack of better words, but when you have a good introduction, let me say that, to acquire that level of understanding from all the different areas that go into a kingdom, that to me is one of the best things you can do to really have a good understanding. Right before you kind of decide to go into try to manage projects. Okay. Even though, yes, I have veered off a lot, let me come right back around to the actual article. Even though, yes, I love everything I talked about for sure. So this person excuse me, I know we read this, but let me kind of go through some of the comments right real quick, because I think this is important to have a good understanding. And what I will say for this player, even though I don't know who this person is, I don't know if they have an in-game name or a Discord name, but what I will say is that for the average player that joins a project, when the project does not work out, what I will say is that I'm going to say sometimes. I don't know if I feel strongly enough to say most of the time, but I will say sometimes. It is not the management. It is not management's fault. It is not the project lead's fault. Sometimes there are just things that are out of your control, and some of those things can be rogue whales. It can be other groups that jump to the same one, right? And sometimes you just have no way of going about it, right? Maybe you tried to organize and to work on different landing spots, but the other group just didn't want to budge, right? Even if your group was the first one to say, hey, look, we're going to go here on this date, right? This is just to give you a couple examples, but these are real things that can happen. And it doesn't mean that your project didn't have or would not have had the highest chances of success. Sometimes you just have bad luck. And that's something that's something I've recognized through the time I've done 7 projects now. I just want to read through a couple comments, right? So Guan Spank says, I think a decent amount of the jumper kingdoms do end up being okay kingdoms. Just the jumper leader gets kicked out, so has to start again in the never-ending attempt to create a kingdom that won't notice they are bad at leading. And so I think this is interesting because, right, the funny part about this is that, like, let's say your project is successful. Right, like let's say the project got to the point of where they were able to kind of get kingdom control, but for whatever reason, maybe some of the alliance leaders or the project lead, something happened and they weren't there anymore. I wouldn't say that project didn't have success. I would, on the contrary, the opposite. I would say yes, that project had success, and largely in part, if not primarily in part, to the leaders that contributed or the project lead or manager that set everything up. Right? Because in order for you to get to A to Z, right, you need to actually write out what those steps are first. You need to actually have a creation. And so I actually value a lot of people that, like myself, who take the time to really write everything out, because for the most part, when I'm doing a project, I'm writing everything out. I'm writing the plan out. I'm writing how we're going to manage events. I'm doing the majority of the recruiting. I'm interviewing the majority of the people, if not everyone. I'm basically doing everything that you could do, from creating the Discord to setting it up to getting the channel set up. And for myself, right, in certain projects, I have help, of course, along the way. But when it comes from laying out the foundation and the groundwork for how things are going to play out in the kingdom, which is basically what you have to do if you want to try and get players to join your project, right? Because you hope that they read what those outlines and those standards and how you're going to manage events are going to be, to then decide if they're interested in joining or not, right? Which is essentially kind of their acknowledgement of saying, yeah, I'm totally down for how this project's going to be ran. But again, right, not all projects will, again, work out that way. This person says, I know a person who exactly like this, pretty toxic, tricks everyone and say they're not leaving when things don't work on his plan, just leave and do something toxic or sort of civil war. Ooh, starting civil wars are rough, man. It's bad stuff. Let me see. Alexis says, honestly, jumping needs to be removed completely. All the newbies to discover and experience the game fresh. This is the thing. This is the thing I'll say, is that you're never going to get rid of. What I will say is you'll never get rid of jumping, even if you remove the ability for projects to, even if you remove the ability for players to create to have beginner teleports, you can do the same exact thing. The only difference is that you would just do it from day one. Right, so you would still gather people, except the difference is that instead of prepping accounts, you would just all make brand new accounts on day one, right, where there's arguably no limit. And you could actually, what's funny is you could get around, and you still actually could even now, which is funny. God, why am I giving secrets away? Jesus. But anyways, let me continue on. This person, I remember the first time I started, I was amazed at how was a 40 million alliance out there in the first hour of the server being created. Later, I found out about jumpers. In my opinion, they should be removed completely. Otherwise, new players get completely early game and just get left behind big time before they even start playing. Then by the first KE, most of them are so out of touch, they just stop playing. Also, seeing jumper groups whining about nerfing jumpers gives me satisfaction for some reason. I personally don't really think jumpers have been nerfed. I mean, for me, I've seen projects when they were at their peak, when you were able to get the best rewards possible for jumping, all the way to where it pretty much is now, where you can't really get anything, or barely any rewards. And to be honest, the extra rewards for me were never really the idea. I mean, I would have been fine just making an account, grabbing villages and caves, and that's it, right? And then maybe just participating in some whatever the weekly event is going on at that time in the kingdom. So for me, kind of getting the extra rewards, like, again, when you were able to kind of cycle through alliances to get those, you could get a bunch of those additional rewards there. You were able to get actually more Chronicle rewards for KVK than you could now, and just other things that you were able to get that really was like wild. But anyways, so what I will comment on here and say is that this person says, right, otherwise new players get from players. What I will say is that this isn't actually always the case. Just because you have a jumper group that comes into a kingdom does not stifle a new player's growth. If anything, by having an organized group that comes in, if you join one of those groups, you'll actually be able to advance and develop your account faster than if you were just joining another project, right? Or sorry, another alliance. And what I should specifically say is you would have a higher percentage chance of doing it. Because there's always the off chance that you might join an alliance that has a lead there that just has a good understanding of what to do and how to advance quickly. But you will always have the highest percentage chance of developing your account faster if you go and you join a project, and assuming that they have kind of a consistent across the board way of developing, right? So each of the alliances can develop at the fastest rate possible. So again, it doesn't really hurt. Along with kind of getting into your first kill event, it also depends on, remember, it also depends on what that group does for how they manage kill event, right, in MGE. Not every project may be the same. Some projects might say, well, hey, we're just going to do free-for-all KE. Some other projects might say, we're not going to do any free-for-all KV. Some projects might have some rules in between, right? So it also depends on how that project is going. What I will say is that if you were in a project and you didn't like the way that the project ran KE, then those are questions you should have asked the lead. You should have asked so they would have addressed it, and then you could have made an actual informed decision on, do I want to be here a part of this project, or do I want to look for another one? In my opinion, that's something that really kind of comes down to the players needing to ask the project if that project was in control of the kingdom at that time, or was able to kind of, put out their managerial recommendation or will to assert. Let me see here. Money says, if you're going to make a post ripping on someone, at least drop their name. Hey! I don't know if this person reposted. Let me see. I'm not OP, but I'm not OP, but I will. Lazy and Miss H. Miss H was doing hostile takeovers in the 1400s era, started way before that, and has restarted repeatedly. Trail of doomed kingdoms in her wake. Lazy is just creepy and a trash leader. Almost forgot Savage. 2185, 1705 with a new kingdom on the way. I don't really know these people, which is interesting. I might do a deep dive on some of this later and kind of do some research. But someone said Miss H sounds familiar. She's an R4 somewhere, also named Ladybug, depending on which kingdom you know her from. I don't know the kingdom, but same content as Lazy. I know a Lazy, I just don't know if this is the Lazy I know. She did a hostile takeover. What's funny is I know a Lazy, and the Lazy is a female, but I still don't know if this is the one I know. I think it was 1450, blamed on some other people's, had numerous jumpers, migrated back. 15, is that misbehaved? Oh, yes, okay. Savage, let me see here. Oh, there's my first name, but I'm wondering, I always try to remember like how this is connected. Haha. Oh, let me see. I had one jump project led by Savage. I remember in the kingdom it was in 2200s. All he wanted was power at all costs. Didn't even know what the heck was going on even as alliance. I really wanted to know what kind of people are those in real life. You have to be really empty inside to try and fill that hole with some virtual power mirage. Oh, I'm going to be honest. This is actually a really good comment. Just from the second part here, kind of doing the definition. And then Laxus mentions me, mentions Bitcoin Mitra. So I don't know what Mitra did. It's so funny because I know Mitra, right? I believe he was one of our officers that came up that I worked with closely and kind of helped coach in some situations as well for the time that he was with them. I don't know if he ever did another project. I guess this person is saying that he did. I obviously don't know kind of how that project went. I might have to take a deeper dive and kind of look at some of the names for people. But again, I'm not sure if Lexus is referring to me in this case. Again, I think the challenge here, and again, I always love having a conversation with anyone who comes to me, because I don't know if I should say it often, but every once in a while, right, I'll have some people that have heard of me, or they know my name, and again, just like anyone else that runs projects, right, you're not going to please everyone, but you hope that everyone has a good understanding and recognition of expectations when they join a project. And one of the things I always really pride myself on is being willing to sit down and have a conversation with anyone. Anyone who's known me for a while, you know that I take a lot of pride in informing, in explaining, in taking time to have that back and forth, being willing to have a conversation with anyone, whether it's feedback, suggestions, constructive criticism. I think it's just really important to be open, to have those conversations with people. And sometimes just being willing to have a conversation with someone can allow for an opportunity of explanation that may not have been otherwise available to you if you're just kind of focusing on text or hearing things from third parties and not really kind of going to the source. In this case, sometimes the people that you're referring to. The current project's Phoenix, led by this girl named Becky. There's also another guy named El Horace on Discord. I've seen multiple projects over the months. Let me see. Hey, let me ask if you check my other comment. I said I knew someone who's exactly like this. Yes, I suspect she's pretty toxic. She failed her jumper project, and in 1910, trickled everyone by saying she's staying with things that didn't work out as planned while she was making another jumper. Ooh, I don't know if that's true. What's funny here, though, and I will comment for those who may not know, is it is hilarious. Man, I should do a deep dive one time and just kind of show off to the RoK community how some of the people who run projects now, or people that were leaders in projects, or even officers, were actually a good amount of players that were in my projects to start out with, right? It's almost like I'm just grooming people. Though not to say that I take any credit for anyone, because again, I just don't feel that there's a few people, but I don't feel that there's, right. I mean, again, people that I know that I think would do a fantastic job at running projects, I could count on one hand, right? And none of these people are mentioned in this article. Just because again, and I can't speak for everyone in this article. I can speak for some people because I do know some of these people. But the people that I do know that are mentioned in this article, I just don't personally think have enough knowledge and experience to run what I would define as like a professionally ran and organized jumper project, right? Where it's really giving the group the highest chances of success for some of the reasons I mentioned earlier on in the video. For some damn well... I think it's just damn well. She is still going my encounter with her 2176. She was top alliance leader when Kingdom opened. Then the Koreans popped up, led by Will Tony and Everly starting trouble. We had multiple chances to zero them and kick them all out, but she refused to help her allies in doing that. Oh, interesting. Razor Force. Oh, so someone else sounds exactly like Becky Law. I heard the same thing back after the first jump failed. Interesting. Again, I don't know. Razor Force. Queen. Let me see. Parking Head. Oh, interesting. So Parking Head actually said something here. Live this. Okay, wait. Let me see here. I really wonder who this person is. So I should message them. Parking Head says I was the leader of another. I'm not hating on projects. I'm really exposing leaders for what they are. If you take offenses to it. I was leader. Oh, Parks. I was leader of another project. Okay. So my intention is to help those who we didn't know. She's just not. Yes, just not necessarily cut out. Anyone who plays even slightly competitively in this game will do anything at their disposal to get an edge over the other players. Rough. Jumping is one. Okay, never mind. Maybe they're referring to it nicely. Jumping is one of these tactics. I understand why some people dislike jumpers, but also do not agree in the sense that they deserve as much hate as they receive. Like, I could start a new account in New Kingdom with the knowledge I know about the game. Could have a significant edge over new players. Now, is that fair? People migrating back to KVK2 with their expertise to Alex Salad and Edward, pushing existing free-to-play into irrelevance. Now, is that fair? Some people experience poor leadership in their current account and wants a chance at leadership by starting fresh with the knowledge that they have, putting in their own time to set up a group and coordinate various parts Now, does that seem like a plausible situation with an understandable motive? Yeah, okay. I have no doubt that there are people with poor intentions. Trust me. From 1904, we were like known for poor leadership, drama, and toxicity. I just want to be a voice for those who are actually putting the time into create. So this is interesting. So Laxus, I guess this person probably was, because my first project actually was 1904. However, for those who may not be familiar with 1904, we actually had two, and now the dots are connecting for why Laxus had mentioned that, and I think Mitra as well, because Mitra was someone who was also in 1904, who initially started out as an officer and then was given an opportunity to kind of run a kind of starter academy alliance at the time. But in 1904, man, 1904 went so well. Overall, they actually went and won their first KVK. I don't know if they won. I don't know how many more they won after that, but I know that at the time when I departed, they were getting, I think it was prepping for KVK, and they went in winning. But the foundation and everything that was built from me, my vision, my image, right, the work that I put in, along with others as well who contributed. But when it comes to the foundational part, right, that was really designed and kind of put out there from what I had planned in my head. And again, I obviously don't know what this person would be speaking towards, just because, again, this is the challenge with reading comments, is that there's usually no context. Most of the time when people are posting content, it's kind of broad, vague statements here and there, right? It's not usually this person's going into the details on why they feel, like, for example, when they say things like poor leadership, drama, toxicity, but what exactly did they experience that led them there? Because I have videos on 1904. I think if you go on my channel, you'll probably find some that are there that, God, I mean, I don't know how many there would be, but if you go there, you should find some. Let me see. All in all, play the game whichever way you like. You don't like jumpers, then don't interact. You want to join a jumper, then luck and due diligence. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Oh wow, this person knows Pony. Interesting. I think you missed the point. This person's like, I think you missed the point of my post. He's like, his Pony still. That's so funny. Yeah, because I know. So I'll give a quick TLDR here, but for those of you who may not be familiar with 1904, right, we, when myself and a good friend of mine, Azza, was running the project there as kind of the two main managerial leads, the kingdom was going so well and just, God, I mean, it was set up so good. Maybe not as good as 2001, but near that. And at the time, we had two big migrating groups that were very interested in coming over to the kingdom. And in short, they basically just came over early without all the details being finalized. And after they came over, we provided them 2 shells. We immediately handed over R5, which later realized we shouldn't have done. Great learning experience as well. And then from there, and that's just more so to say, like, I think you just have to put groups on a probation period if you don't know them or if you don't have anyone that can vouch for them. And then over a period of time, maybe about a week and a half after, right, we start kind of getting these brief rumblings, right? Like they're planting these seeds of distrust, of kind of what they felt at the time was kind of poor managing. They felt like things could be done a lot better. We basically would have to change certain foundational things that we already set up. We promised the group we were going to do in order to kind of accommodate what they were asking for, and almost to a point of what they eventually started demanding. And so this kind of led to internal strife within the kingdom. And at one point when we were talking with the leaders, it kind of turned into what could have essentially started kind of a civil war. And so instead of kind of playing that game and, playing that out, we fast forward, we did a vote, and the vote essentially was, I believe the vote essentially was how many people want to keep the kingdom being managed the way it is, right, with myself and this other person kind of in power, not necessarily in power, but just kind of being the oversight, objective decision makers, right, for the group. And of course, this is always like an if and when necessary. It doesn't mean that everything is obviously ran through, because not everything really has to be when you have things pre-planned out. Or do we want to go the route where it's like just a pure kind of council diplomacy, where everyone kind of has this equal vote, equal say, at least in their minds, even though everyone, of course, did have a say and votes at times when they were necessary to do them. And the challenge is that when you look at things from just a public perception, you can easily paint a picture where it's like some people are making it seem as though one option is a dictatorship, and one option is we do things diplomatically, right? Or as a democracy, everyone gets a fair vote, right? It's really easy to kind of paint such a simplistic black and white picture where you can argue that the democratic option is more favored based on the audience, based on the player base and their backgrounds that we had in the kingdom at the time, and the people that were in management who were voting, right? The officers and the leads, which we had almost like 100 people that voted. And of course, you can then infer that there's just a more likely chance you're going to vote for what you would perceive, regardless of wording, on the democratic option over the dictator option, right? Even though what's funny is everyone agreed, and this often happens too as well, if you have a well-oiled machine, that the kingdom is going well. There was just, again, differences on the hierarchy structure that we had in place, and they basically wanted to change that along with a few other things. And so the vote ended up going through there in 1904, and then pretty much about a little less than half of the people from the original group left, and that's when we went to go and do the restart for 2001. So remember, this is why context is important, because it wasn't as though one person left. It wasn't as though a few people left. There was a grip of people, and that's some of my slang, leaving, right? Or let's just say a good amount, a healthy amount of people leaving the kingdom because they didn't want to play in an environment where rules can be changed so often and were so flippant in the approach for how easily they can be changed, right? And that's the challenge there. And this is something that I think, and it got him on like 40 minutes now in this video, but this is something that kingdoms, and I'm sure if you're in a kingdom, you have probably seen this happen, right? Where you come in, you guys have set ideals, you have set standards, but then for whatever reason, some people want to do this vote, or you guys want to have some kind of a change, and it's almost like your integrity, your ideals are all up for grabs. They're all up to be changed. And I personally am just not one that believes that. Now, yes, I do believe that I think some things can be amended. I think improvements can be made. But, if it's not broke, don't fix it. And I think the other thing as well, and that doesn't necessarily apply or amount to every single thing, but I do believe that if you have a good system in place based on the way that kingdom is being done, remember, all kingdoms can be managed and can be actioned and governed in different ways. What I often find happens is that you'll have like migrants that will come in, or other players that, whether it's a group or individuals, or even it could just be small internal parties that happen as well. I've seen this happen. And it's almost as though they're trying, it's like everyone is trying to just change the kingdom's direction into what they have seen that has worked, instead of believing, having some faith and some loyalty and a little bit of trust in understanding that there are multiple ways a kingdom can be successful. There's multiple ways a kingdom can thrive. It is not absolutely one way or this way or that way. And sometimes it's just, again, going along for the ride, really immersing yourself to try and understand what's currently being done and seeing how it plays out. Not immediately coming into an environment and saying, we need to change this, we need to change that, we need to change that, or this other thing because it's not working, right? And I can't tell you how many times I've seen that happen, where you'll go into a kingdom, your project's there, it's going great, and when you just, out of nowhere, you just have people start coming out like, oh, I just don't think this is really working out that well. I feel like I can't do this or I can't do that. And it's like a seed that festers. And sometimes it just starts from the smallest thing that you would not even expect. And so that, I think, is another side of it, that it's so wild how that can happen. And you wouldn't think something like that would happen, because you would think that, well, everyone in the project understood what they were signing on for, understood what the project entailed, how we were going to manage all these events, how we were going to manage the zones, how we were going to do prep for certain things, how we're going to manage kill event and MGE. But then out of nowhere, you'll find more often than not, right, some people in your project over a period of time, depending on how early or late, will say some of these things, right? Or most of the time, it usually kind of comes from migrating groups or players that are coming in. So just really interesting. I just wanted to take a moment to kind of go over that. Let's scroll down a little more. This person says, Frosty, it's pretty simple. Many people organizing or whales joining a large government project have a certain personal goal in mind. They all say winning KVK and building a stable kingdom is their top priority, but their own personal agenda often is to be leader of one of the top alliances. This person knows what they're saying. To be king, to be in the kingdom council, to be decision makers in the kingdom, and potentially use their power to their own benefit. I'm not saying all players organizing jumping groups are like that, but every jumping project I participated in had several of these types of players seeking power positions. I don't know who you are, Farasati. I'm going to message you later after this video because this person is spot on. And again, this doesn't mean that this is happening for every project, but I have seen this experience. A good example of this is when... and this has happened a few times to me where the project is just going so well, but the people that are in the leader positions, for whatever reason, get this like illusionary thing in their mind as though, their voice doesn't count or they're not being heard, when in reality it's, hey, we had a conversation, we talked about it, and we went over the pros and cons about what you were suggesting or the piece of feedback you were giving based on what was currently being done. And it's just not more efficient or more effective than what is currently being done. And that's okay, because it doesn't mean that we always have to try and one-up or provide something that we feel or that the individual feels is better than what's being done. But at the same time, we should have those conversations. We should be willing to talk those things out. And so I've had these situations happen a couple times. And it's funny because what'll happen is that it starts off really small, where you'll have leaders that, like, they'll propose something again, but in their mind, all they're seeing is this person, and I'll just use myself as an example, is saying no, 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 when in reality, we're actually going through a very healthy discussionary process of, you brought the feedback, let's talk about it, let's have the back and forth, let's get into a call if needed, right? And let's really talk it out on what the pros and cons are of what you're suggesting versus what we're doing, right? And if there's not more pros or less cons than what we're currently doing from what you're suggesting, then, obviously we just wouldn't do that. And we also have to consider what the project, right, the direction the project is going, right? What have we promised the group? What have we promised the kingdom? What have we said publicly? Because that also factors in large part into what we're doing now. So it's not just about all the time of, hey, I'm going to propose something better. Sometimes it really comes down just to having a good foundational level of understanding in all the areas of how that project is being ran, of how it's being managed, and the promises that have been made to the group. But this person, from what they're saying, again, in my opinion, 100% spot on here. I've seen this happen where, and like I was saying, the example is that when you have, when I've been voted out, because this has happened a couple times, where you'll have the leaders that come, and because all they're hearing is no, 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 when that's anything but the truth, is then they're like, oh, well, we need to get together, right? Because boss has all this supposed power, right? And it's funny because it's so far from that. And it's almost blasphemous, right, when I hear people say that, is that they feel in their mind that, we need our vote to count. We want to be the ones to essentially be the decision makers. That's really what it comes down to, right? They can give you all the fluff they want, but at the end of the day, if you agree that the kingdom is doing well, that it so far, and you can even statistically prove a lot of this stuff, right? Like, people wouldn't migrate to your kingdom if you're doing badly. There's a lot of options out there, right? And that's whether or not your group, whether it's players or alliances, are looking to migrate because they're trying to escape something, or they just want to migrate because the kingdom just is losing activity. They can choose multiple kingdoms, right? So you're obviously doing something right if players or groups decide to migrate to you. I am a firm believer of that. And that's not to say that, what you're doing that is attracting people is bad or good, but you have to at least be doing something that, in the people that want to migrate to you's eyes, is doing something well enough for them to come. And so when you look at it from that perspective, right, from that approach, it's wild that you then look at leaders that decide, hey, we're going to kind of uproot, and we want to be the ones that have power. We want to be the ones that are the decision-making body. And I think it really hits on what this Farasati person is saying, because it really comes off as a power grab. And that's the hard part, I think, for the average player to see, because the average player has no idea what goes on, for the most part, behind the scenes in kind of kingdom politics or just kind of kingdom governance, because usually that's left up to officers and leads, right, for the contributing alliances that are part of the kingdom that are still active. And then they go on to say, of course, if such a person fails to reach their personal goal of obtaining such position, it's likely they will either quit the game or give it more tries. Yep. In my most recent project I joined, we had 8 whales, of which 2 had aspirations of becoming king. They were R5 in their alliance and dropping gold chests daily, trying to become the strongest alliance. All they did was spend a lot of money. Other players were doing the hard work, yet still they felt they should have a say in everything, that the people doing the actual work should report to them. During KVK 1, our kingdom failed badly. Those 2 players did barely contribute. We ended up zeroing both and put the hardworking people in charge to lead the kingdom. We then won KVK 2 and 3. I think this is an absolute thing that does happen. I don't know how often it happens, but I will say this does happen, because I've had this happen. Even what's funny, we had this happen briefly in 1904 and along with 2001, where we actually had, I think, 1 or 2 alliances at the time where the lead currently, one situation was where the lead got a whale. He got like an early whale, and he felt that because he had the whale, he was now deserving of his alliance having more territory, more structures and objectives, and which eventually led to them saying, "Oh no, I want the entire Zone 1 province to myself because I have this whale." And it was like this inflated version of unrealistic expectations from having one player, even though this person really wasn't doing a lot of the work for the kingdom. He just happened to be an alliance leader at the time, and I don't believe they were. I actually can't remember if they were part of our project or not. But it was just very unfortunate with how the situation played out. And this is just one example of things that can happen. And I think BOSSNASTi really did a fantastic, eloquent job of pointing this out and really detailing out how these things happen, because they can. And I think this is why it's important to have people, and it's funny because there's like this negative connotation of where if you do not have high power, if you're not an active player participating in the kingdom, right, then why do we listen to you? Why would we do anything for these players? Why would you be leading an alliance? When, on the contrary, I could make the argument that the person who spends the majority of their time managing, assisting, doing a lot of the logistical work for the kingdom, even if they barely or do not play, is arguably more valuable, right, when it comes to the health of the kingdom and the sustainability of the kingdom, right, than the average player. And that's not to say that there's no worth for those. We're merely talking about the impact of what the everyday experience is like for that average player when it comes to what has to be done that impacts that. And that's managing. So anyways, interesting. Let me see here. So, which is super funny because 1904 was like so long ago, right? And I look at these posts here like that are 3 months ago, which is hilarious. Let me see. Live Life. Oh, nice little shout out here. Live This Life says, the only jumps that I have seen with much dignity would be the ones run by Outlaw, which is Outlaw's Crazy. Shout out to Outlaw, good friend. Also, I think BOSSNASTi did good, although now he's moved on to new games. I'm from Canada, seen many jumps and many leaders fall. One, for instance, was 2074. Chris's project was crazy for one. You had to get interviewed and proved you spent. He quit once things was hard too. For all the bad leads, there are good too. Fate projects with Dracula and Outlaw. I never saw them lose. BOSSNASTi also did good. So anyways, it just really interesting here because I think the challenge is that, and this is the last thing I'll end with. I actually didn't even think I was going to be here for an hour talking about this. But what I will say is that, and if you've made it to the end, if you've still been watching this long, and I have done a good job of keeping your attention, then, I'll give myself one of these. And I hope, obviously, you're still enjoying. The last thing I'll leave you with here is that what I will say is this. If you are leading a project, and let's say, for example, there's some kind of coup, there's a mutiny, there's a change in hierarchy structure, and let's say that you feel, right, what I will say is, look at how the kingdom had been progressing. How were they doing up until that point, right? And then cut it off and, kind of put together stats or put together your assessment. And then if there's a new regime that takes over, then restart that clock and look at how they're doing, with the kingdom, right? And then you can make the argument on whether or not this project failed, the individual failed, or the circumstances were taken out of their control and they were actually doing a fantastic job leading and succeeding in the kingdom up until, right, some kind of drastic change happened. And now the new people that are put in power, right, the new people that have the what they would refer to as decision-making power or control, right, how are they doing? Because if they're not doing, in my opinion, right, just as good of a job or better of a job than the individual or individuals who were there, then I can make the argument that they made the wrong decision. That, yeah, maybe they did just want the power. And they're not doing as good of a job or better of a job than the people or peoples that were in, if you want to call it power, or just kind of in those positions before. And so that's kind of an interesting nugget that I'll give to you, because I often see that happen. I will tell you that there's been every project I've done that has ever ended in that, which has been a few, right, where my position, if you will, was kind of voted out, or people thought they could do a better job, right, for whatever reasons, / they just wanted the power, the fictitious power, so to speak. Every project I've seen, if you think about it right now, if I just had stopped playing games altogether, then yeah, you could probably make an actual argument for this. But because at the time when those things happened, I was still playing RoK, I effortlessly could have still been contributing there if those things didn't happen, and obviously would be. But then when you look at how the kingdoms went, they immediately started deviating from the pillars, right, that I had instilled along with others contributing to. And that eventually led to, whether you can call it them just not being as strong as they could be, not going as well as it could have gone, and what I would feel like kind of just struggling and stumbling. Anyways, with that being said, that's it for me. Again, pretty much almost here at an hour. A great conversation and a good talk. I should basically just be doing video podcasts at this point with how long these go. I'll be honest, I did not intend for this to last that long. But I just thought this was a great conversation to touch on, because I think it's something that's really important. If you're a new player to Rise of Kingdoms or Kingdom Builders, if you're someone who's done jumpers before, if you are a jumper, if you're just curious on what goes into them, this is a great video for you to watch to get a really in-depth understanding in a lot of multiple areas or different areas that play into jumper projects before you start, while it's going, and even after. And if anything, I'd love to know your thoughts, right? Is there any part of what I talked about that you liked, that I touched on, that I covered, something that stood out to you, right? Were you a part of some of these projects, or even mine, right? Do you think as though, maybe you could have reached out to these people, whether it's leads or managers, right, to try and get a little bit better of an understanding, right, in case maybe some things might have been misinterpreted. Just anything and everything you guys are thinking, right? I'd love to know in the comments down below. That is it for me. Until next time, I'll catch you later.